Доброго вечора, шановні колеги.
Good evening, dear colleagues. Today in the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, we have the first event out of serious diplomacy without borders, and we have via Skype Mr. Valeriy, ambassador of Ukraine to the United States. Good evening, Your Excellency. Good evening. I'm happy that you have this project because it's now very important for me. It's very pleasant to see you at this rostrum because I also played this role several years ago, 2-3 years ago, and now I'm here in the United States, and partnership of this country is very important for Ukraine under conditions of the external aggression. Thank you very much. In relation to the recent elections held in the USA, our Ukrainian contemporaries quite often ask the question, what changes we may expect to see in the Ukrainian-American relations. Some days ago, in your comment to one of Ukrainian media, you mentioned that you are rather optimistic in this respect. What are your reasons to have this optimism? Thank you for this question. Now, in the United States, one can see a rather complicated period, the period of transfer of power. But I nevertheless would like to mention that the comments which you might see in the media are not sufficient to produce any conclusion about diplomacy. A lot of things which diplomats discuss or do they do not become obvious to the broad public. That's why not everything which is done by diplomats is known to broad public. I think that external aggression of Russia is observed not just by Ukrainian party but our neighbors too. And I can comment that the recent past period of my stay here in the United States, the period of election campaign was marked with intensive visits to the party congresses of both Democrats and Republicans, and we studied carefully the platforms of the candidates and tried to contribute to those platforms. In the Republican position paper, you might see quite clear statements about Ukraine, about non-recognition of aggression, about support to Ukraine in general, and support to its territorial integrity, and support to Ukraine in terms of civil, in terms of defense of the country. And I'm very grateful to the support from local Ukrainian diaspora here in the United States, which greatly contributed to this fact that these important statements are reflected in the position papers of the parties. On the other hand, we approached to both campaigning parties with personal meetings. I had almost 47 personal meetings with congressmen from both parties, from Democrats, from the Republicans, and with those who potentially might be appointed to the important posts in new administration. At the same time, we continue to maintain contacts with the current administration because we have some issues which have to be tackled by January 20th. For example, the budget for the next year will be passed here by the end of January, by the end of December, and we expect for support. Last year we got 275 million for the defense and security area, and I think this happened with our contribution. I'm very grateful to those senators and congressmen who contributed to this. I think that now many congressmen and senators who supported this, they were re-elected, and we expect their support in the future too. Then I would like to mention publicity which we tried to create for Ukraine during all this period. I personally held around 100 interviews with the world media, even despite the preoccupation with the local election campaign in the United States. But I thought it was very important to point out to the issues of Crimea, the occupation in the east of Ukraine. All that issues were continuously brought in the center of attention of local media here in the United States. That's why that informational work became an important part of our pro-Ukrainian campaigning here. So as of now, as of today, when we established and strengthened contacts here, when we clarified a lot of issues and approaches, we became more understandable to people here, to diplomats and politicians here. And now our main objective is to bring Ukrainian issues to attention here, which is not easy, keeping in mind Syrian issues, Estonian issues, and many other issues. Thank you for Ukrainian servicemen from ATO zone recently represented Ukraine at the 41st marathon of the armed forces, and this was an important, I think, piece of your work. Whether you plan to continue this initiative, I think that this was a very important initiative. Upon initiative from the President, Ukrainian embassy continuously deals with the rehabilitation issues for our wounded servicemen from ATO zone. And this is important not just for governmental issues. This is important for personal contacts. For example, I spent a lot of time together with our servicemen, with our guys. We experienced huge psychological support from local community here in the United States, and understood that delivery of assistance, of treatment, rehabilitation is a good thing, and it's good when you have sufficient means to do this. But what is more important, this is this personal communication, this psychological support. So to Vadim, Vadim first and Vadim the second, who arrived from Ukraine, they have covered the distance heroically. The one you cannot imagine how it is important to cover the marathon when you are a limbless person, when you have prosthesis. And I was so happy to see Vadim when he covered this distance, and this demonstrated our courage, our bravery, and our ability to overcome hardships. Now, when Vadim came back to Ukraine, I'm happy to know that the president appointed Vadim an ombudsman for the ATO disabled servicemen rehabilitation. There are a lot of issues around this because this is a new area for Ukraine. These are challenges which appeared some 2 years ago, not earlier. Nevertheless, here we have a lot of medical issues and assistance to provide to our servicemen. Here there are severe burnings, there are burns, severe damages of limbs. Recently, one more major arrived from the ATO area, and I continuously maintain ties with all the servicemen who undergo treatment here. I think that it was not marathon alone which attracted attention to our servicemen, but that attention is not the most important thing. I think the most important thing here is that they can continue to hold a full life. Thank you very much. Maybe we have questions from the audience. Good afternoon. I am Sayenka Vitaly from Union Agency. You mentioned about transit team by Donald Trump. And now my question, could you mention specific names of people who might be appointed as Secretary of State and the Defense Secretary? Thank you. That is what I tried to explain in my introduction, that I think it's not advisable to speak about personalities at this very moment. This is the period when new team won't be happy because of publication of this information, but to give you a flavor about the level of this contacts. There was a discussion about the possibility to establish contacts, direct contacts between two presidents, the president of Ukraine and the president of the United States, was highly appreciated by people in responsible positions. About personalities, I look at Johnson Ingrich and those advisors which are offered to take a position of the National Security Advisor as for the Department of State. Let us not try to make guesses at this very moment, but I can assure you that I had meetings with all 4 people who are now in the short list. Of course, these were not discussions about their future work in that position, but we discussed in general support of Ukraine, some strategic issues. I met with many people who are now in the transit team who contribute to shaping position of the future presidential team. We met with those who were in the team of the previous president, and we discussed quick maintenance called construction of the new dialogue. The issue is that the position, strategic position of the United States, the policy of the United States for middle term period, it is not developed yet. Here, focus on on names, on specific person who will take some positions. That's right, but we should pay more attention to policy, which will be developed in nearest future. When I hear that there is a pro-Russian team which is coming to power, but I think that's a bit exaggeration, because in the United States always there is a balance of influences on decision making. This is the Congress, the defense ministry structures, etc. And when newly elected president comes into office, he has to balance all that intentions in the policy of the country. Currently, we very thoroughly try to reach those people with whose scope falls the issue of Crimea's occupation. And so President Kerry once stated that when transferring the affairs, they nevertheless will very carefully watch and observe the issue of Crimea. Russia recently was recognized the occupant of Crimea. I am very grateful to the United States for support of this resolution. I think we have sufficient contacts for finding solutions of current issues and to contribute to strategic issues. But the access to these contacts takes place on competitive basis, so to say. Our opponents also try to do the same. I cannot mention all the names here now, but I encourage you to pay more attention at the direct outcomes. Quite often politicians or political observers pay attention at the personalities, pay no attention to the amounts of financial support, financial allocations for defense purposes, etc. This is the best reflection of our interaction. Further questions, please, dear colleagues. Union, once again, a specifying question. Yesterday we heard an information that there potentially might be a visit by Petro Poroshenko to the United States in February, and maybe there might be a meeting with the President Trump. Is there any possibility that the President might be present at the inauguration? As for the inauguration, in the United States, they do not have any tradition of inviting leaders of another states to the inauguration. Usually, the foreign states are invited at the level of ambassadors. This is different from our procedure when we invite representatives of other states, and thus State Secretary Joe Biden attended the inauguration of our president, Petro Poroshenko. On the other hand, there is useless to have a visit immediately upon inauguration, immediately after the January 20th. So when I have got the information that and task to organize the presidential visit immediately after inauguration in February, I think that's rather ambitious, but my previous experiences encourages me to make a serious attempt to do this, and I see this as discussion of the agenda, discussion of possible ways to discuss potential strategic partnership. We have cooperation in various areas, and it would be good to discuss strategic partnership with new administration. And we have some issues which require immediate solutions, like issue of Crimea, for example. I think that this visit close to the inauguration, this might be very useful and productive for us, and this will one more victory for our diplomacy. Thank you, Mr. Charlie, for your time, and if you allow me, I would like to add a couple of words. First of all, to all the journalists and experts who are proactive in information work, not just in spreading information what's going on, but to those who permanently work in this field. Quite often we have up to 100 people attending the United States, and we try to arrange all the events to make such visits productive. We also have plans as to informational work. and I would be happy to see groups of journalists and groups of experts here in Washington, D.C., which would allow us to strengthen our strengthen the level of our information work. These days, we are having meetings with Ukrainian diaspora organizations in order to coordinate our activities. Also, we maintain ties with President of Ukraine, Leonid Kravchuk, the first president, and we will coordinate our consulate work, some cultural events, and I would like to draw your attention to the work of embassies and consulates in other countries. We have several thousand of adopted children, and for example, we opened the new bigger consulate unit here. Now, today we opened an exhibition in the premises of this cultural center, which we opened in the premises of our consulate. This is an exhibition devoted to Maidan events. Also, we showed famous Ukrainian movies which were nominated for Oscar prize. So I encourage journalists to look broader at our work here. Here, I mean not just our embassy in the United States, but the work of Ukrainian diplomacy everywhere in the world. Let us speak not just about problems. We are a big European country. We have many decent people, and as a Ukrainian diplomat working here, I can assure you we have a lot of decent people here, a lot of Ukrainian diplomats here who do their work as good as possible. We are always open for communication. We are always ready to answer your questions. You know how to contact us, and we would be very grateful for cooperation. As to the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, I wish you a lot of success with the new project. We have one more question from the room. Olena Sepchenko, UCMC. It's a comment, it's not a question. I would like to thank you. I think it's right that you became the first guest of this project, newly launched today, because we believe that your involvement into this very important area of our diplomacy, your involvement into cultural projects showing different Ukraine, showing new Ukraine, and at the same time discovering the problem issues of today's Ukraine. That's very important. I'm very grateful to you, and I would like to express this on behalf of myself and on behalf of other journalists. I wish you a lot of successes and a lot of inspiration in your work. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you also. Wish you all the successes.